Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games. And today we're going to be doing issues 61 to 70 of our continuing Warhammer Imperium series Painted. Now issue 61 was an interesting one because it comes with some nice little bits of lore. There's an introduction into the Inquisition, which would be basically the scary problem solvers of the Imperium. Inquisitorial agents are basically agents that can do what they want, wherever they want, to whoever they want, short of practically the Emperor and the Custodians themselves. They can even kind of mass conscript sections of the Astra Militarum and enlist the help of Space Marines. So this is an introduction to them. It also goes into Warzone Manask, which is basically a war zone that's beset by Nurgle, and there's a chapter called the Grey Knights who would specialize in kind of demonic incursions fighting upon it. You have a story called the Festering Hordes, again, which is about the Grey Knights taking on Nurgle's lot. You have the how to build and how to paint aspect of the third Tomb Blade. You have new sets of rules, which is the Necron's Cryptic Arcana rules and the Adeptus Sororitas rules, Blessings of the Faithful. It also goes into battle-forged armies, so this is a way that you can kind of get your armies working together a little bit more cohesively. It reduces the units you can kind of place and put out, but if you do have a battle-forged armies, the lack of diversity, or say fixed diversity, makes up for itself in other ways. You also have the Scout and Engage, which is the Veteran Mission. This also comes with a separate Veteran Mission pack, which is kind of a fold-out thing, just basically kind of going over the missions a little bit more elaborate. But of course, that is not all. It also comes with the last of the Tomb Blades, and of course this again is another varied build. So this was the third Tomb Blade I made. It has, it's the third Tomb Blade I'd made. It's something I've already made 2 times before. Be careful when you pick it up, because I picked it up here and I snapped that a little bit off and had to re-glue it, so always make sure you pick this up by the base. But it's just the third of the 3 Tomb Blades. A nice new configuration again, because sometimes these little wings are in the front or in the back, or there's a different weapon here in the front. So yeah, it's just the third variation of the Tomb Blades. And so that was issue 61 of Warhammer Imperium magazine. Now, issue 62 is a paint issue. It doesn't come with any minis, but the good thing about this is that it does come with a lot of lore, because it doesn't have a build or an over-elaborate paint guide. It allows you to focus on a bit more of the backstory of the 40k universe. So, of course, the first page is about Space Marine veterans, and now you don't just have veterans in terms of Space Marines, you also have Terminator veterans, Stern Guard veterans, and Vanguard veterans. Now, how there are such a thing as Vanguard veterans, I don't know, because they are basically the guys that go toe-to-toe with absolutely everything. You have a story, or not a story, but a kind of a detailed aspect about the Silent King, which would be a Necron leader, or the Necron leader. You have the Dias of Dominion, the final Triarch. You have something called the Crimson Fists, which are a famous chapter within the 40k universe. I believe they're an offshoot of the Ultramarines, famous for fighting against the Greenskins. You have some of the characters here, so just basically backstory on the Crimson Fists. You have Uriel Ventress. Now, there's several books about Uriel Ventress out there on the Ultramarines, and he's actually quite a famous character. You could also get an actual miniature of Uriel Ventress himself, but this basically is just the story of the captain of the 4th Company, and he's interesting in that his color scheme is green. Most of the Ultramarines would have a kind of a gold lapel, but Uriel Ventress in the 4th Company indeed has this green kind of surrounding symbol on them. So just a nice bit of variety if you wanted to focus on specifically or have members from a certain part of the company. You have Vario Tigerius, which would be the chief librarian of the Ultramarines. Now, he also has his own mini. I often use a kind of a substitute, another chapter librarian, but he's excellent on the actual battlefield, a great player to play because he's just that little bit more powerful. You also have the Crux Terminatus, so it's a story basically about the Terminators, so there's a few pages to that. You have a How to Paint model update. Now, this basically is the final touches on a lot of your models, so it goes into the Ultramarines and also some of the Mechanicus and also the Chronomancer. So if you wanted to put final touches on the paint guide here, you have the Space Marine rules, which is the obscuration, discipline. You have also a mission at the end called the Crystal Matrix, and that is issue 62. Now, issue 63 comes with 5 new Space Marine models, and they're quite interesting. So, of course, you can see here the Infiltrators, which is basically the models you'll be getting over the next few issues. Of course, there is the battle record if you want to kind of not personalize them and name them. There's also the how to build the actual machines, the Marines themselves. And you have the basic how to paint guide, including again here the Space Marine Infiltrator cloak, which is something I actually want to talk to you about because it's something I found exceptionally hard to do, and I did 3 different versions of it. Now, I decided to keep my mistakes because for the sake of the video I might as well show it to people, but I settled on a pattern on my own towards the end, and I'll show you in a little bit. You have, of course, the stats for the Eliminator Squad, the Infiltrator Squad, and the Suppressor Squad. Now, the Suppressor Squad are an interesting one to get because they're actually quite hard minis to get. They don't sell them separately and only part of a bigger pack. So if you want to get the Suppressors for a fair price, it's nearly worth hunting down these 3 issues of Warhammer Imperium to get them. And, of course, you have a veteran and tutorials supply called the... called Crucial Resupply, which is the last mission for this issue of Warhammer Imperium. So let's have a look at the models themselves. Now, the first one again is the Suppressor. Now, these actually are hard enough to get. Like I said, they don't sell them separately like they do with the Eliminators or the Aggressors or anything like that. These guys are basically only part of a kit. So if you want to kind of get them at a fair price, getting the 3 issues where these are included is possibly your best bet. That's still €30, but nevertheless, you do get quite an awful lot with it, so it is good value for money. The only thing I found difficult about these guys was the weight of the weapon. I had to kind of, when I was gluing it, I had to balance it on top of a paint pot just to make sure that the weapon arm didn't sag. But otherwise, it was a fun little paint. Again, here as well, this is actually quite... I find these endlessly difficult to try and balance and glue it on top of the actual... the transparent stick so that you can kind of have the guy in perpetual motion. Another thing as well, these guys always tend to lean forward. I had one of my former Space Marines was leaning too far forward and looked a bit silly, but this one looks more like a controlled landing. But when you are gluing them and putting them together, make sure that you have support for the weapon and support here so that he doesn't slowly tilt as he's setting. You have here some of the other infiltrators, so some of these are really cool. I mean, I really quite like this two-handed pistol grip, and this is actually the professional way of firing a pistol. This is the way you kind of do the best aim. So it was a nice little bit of detail here, rather than the kind of the running, firing, one-handed type of thing. This is an actual proper tactical shot. Now, that said, he still have his weapon slung over him, but Space Marines being Space Marines, I'm sure they're strong enough to not have any stagger or kind of muzzle drift with the actual weapon. But nonetheless, the infiltrators are actually really cool. I quite enjoyed painting these little models. It just has a nice kind of cool little vibe, and one of the things I like about it as well, it only has one proper shoulder pauldron. The other one is just kind of a bare shoulder guard. So they're kind of a cool, nice little sidestep to the Ultramarines. So you have lots of cool little dynamic poses here. So I mean, you have another infiltrator that's kind of maybe changing direction or about to come into action. So he's just basically reacting to enemy fire and going from a phase of normal pose into literally the moment before he takes action. And you have here another fellow, of course, which has, I don't know, I think these are really cool kind of looking figures. I mean, I have no idea what the purpose the aerials are for, maybe for kind of extra vox casting or comms or something, but they're just cool looking little things, and not the most powerful Space Marines in the battlefield, but nevertheless, you know, just the fact that their sheer style makes up for it. Now, this is the Eliminator. Now, I'm afraid I actually kind of butchered this. What I had tried initially was to follow the pattern on top with the Space Marine kind of dark and white kind of camo, but I just could not get it right. So what I decided to do then was to try a kind of a lightning effect coming down, where basically this was the camouflage part, the muck and dirt, which was kind of matching the muck and dirt in the front. And I was hoping to have a kind of a transparent lightning thing coming all the way across and separating between the two. And unfortunately, it didn't come out the way I hoped. But nevertheless, I said I'd hold on to it and show it here to basically give people an idea. Now, I think I tried lots of different things. I tried blue blending, white blending, things like that. The only thing that kind of gave me any kind of a success was using white, is to try and symbolize the electricity, kind of, you know, the cloak, decloaking as it were, from muck to the normal grey standard one. But it just doesn't quite work. But nevertheless, I said I'd show it to you today just to highlight my mistake, and when I show you the next two infiltrators, you'll see what I eventually settled on, and it's probably what I will do with this guy in the future. So that was issues 62 and 63. Now, issue 64 of Warhammer Imperium comes with 5 Deathmark Necrons. Now, these are basically Necron snipers. Very interesting little models, but we'll have a look at the issue first. So obviously it comes here with the kind of an introduction and assembly, kind of what they look like assembled for you. You have here some lore on Artemis, which is one of the heroes of the 40k Imperium. You also have here Ortan Cassius, another hero. This guy is, well, to be honest with you, you wouldn't want to be him. Apparently he's the oldest living space marine in the Ultramarines, and he's been frittered. As you can see here from his face, he was laid low by a Carnifex, and they kind of rebuilt him, and he's passionately hateful towards the Tyranids. And of course you have here the first Tyrannic War. So the Ultramarines are, well, not unique amongst the Space Marines, but to be among the best in the Space Marines in the fact that they were the ones that took down High Fleet Leviathan, or were the first ones to have a major scale battle with the Tyranids. You have here, of course, a little bit of information on the battle for Macragge. You have the death marks again, so we have how to assemble, how to paint, and just various details. You have some new Space Marine rules in terms of deployment, some new Necron rules in terms of the rules of the Necron tier, and of course you have the data sheet for the death marks and a mission called A Rallying Cry. So the actual miniatures themselves are interesting. They're new, kind of, because they're specialist units and snipers. They're not quite as battle damaged as the rest of them. Now, one thing I noticed was their chests are extra thick, and the arms didn't seem long enough to kind of fully wrap around. So it looks like that they're humping the weapons quite high. Whereas when I was looking at them on the issues above, the weapons are quite low. They're kind of like waist height, but I found that very difficult to achieve because they're all kind of waist up. No matter what I tried, I just could not get the weapon around the front. Now maybe I have the torso back a little bit too far, but nevertheless, I mean, if you're looking down on it from the tabletop, it looks fine. But if you're looking at it straight on, it seems that, yeah, they're kind of trying to lift the weapon out of the water or something. And I found that was a problem with nearly all of them. Now, like, they're beautiful models, they're lethal, and because they're a specialist Necron model, there's no real obvious battle damage on them. So you can do a nice, you can kind of doll them up and bling them as much as you want. Now the torsos are all interesting because they kind of come into different shapes and sizes. They're all pretty much the same weapon, but it's not the same mini over and over. They have different leg poses, different arm poses, so you do have some variants that you can do with it. But nevertheless, I just found the chest was too thick to kind of allow the weapon to settle in front easily, and I couldn't figure out why or how to do it. But nevertheless, it looked fine from above and from a tabletop perspective, but from straight on, it just seems like that they're hoisting the weapons in front of their faces. This one, of course, was the best one I had because it looks like he's getting the weapon ready to fire. But snipers, of course, usually use very huge weapons. Well, ones that are shooting from a very great distance use rifles that are huge. So, I mean, they are big weapons, nearly comically big for Necrons. I mean, the weapon itself is practically the size of them, if not longer. So, I suppose, naturally, you would be kind of hoisting it up a little bit to kind of run, but it was just something I couldn't get right with the chest and the torso. So perhaps if someone has built death marks of their own and they found a way to kind of get around it, or can spot the mistake that I have made in assembling these, they could tell the rest of us. But it was just something I wanted to warn people about anyway, is that they look grand. You have the annoying white face. They only have a singular eye in the middle of the head, but that the weapon is huge. It's literally as tall, if not taller, than the actual Necron. So it makes it kind of slightly difficult to just slightly difficult to not make it look like that this fella is, it's like he's struggling with the weight of the weapon, type of thing. So, nevertheless, they're cool models to have, cool minis to have, and it was certainly nice to do something different for the Necron army. But those are the figures you get with issue 64 of Warhammer Imperium. 65 comes with the Phobos Marines, and it's actually a great issue to get because you get a lot of minis in this one. You also get a Phobos Lieutenant. So if you were going to double up on issues or trying to buff out your Space Marine army a little bit, this is one of the better issues to get. It of course comes with details on the Lieutenant in the Phobos armor and his war gear. It also comes with some more information on the heroes of the Imperium. So this one issue focuses a little bit more on the Space Wolves, because you've Logan Grimoire, you have Ragnar Blackmane. Now he came out in a box set there a couple of years ago. Beautiful mini, and he was up against this massive orc, which was twice the size of him, but he still didn't kind of face down from him. It has some information on the Space Marine vehicles and dreadnoughts and whatnot. It has how to build guide and how to paint guide, of course. So because you've already painted so many Marines, it actually goes into a nice little bit of detail, so you're not starting from scratch again when you're kind of painting up these figures. It also has the data sheets on the actual Lieutenant himself, and you have, of course, a tutorial on how the Phobos operate and the Lieutenant and the kind of the aura effect he has on his fellow soldiers. And you have, of course, the mission is called Opening the Tomb. So, with no further ado, let's have a look at these minis and see what you get inside this issue. So, I suppose what we will do is we will start with the Lieutenant, since he is the star of the issue. So the Lieutenant himself obviously doesn't come with any transfers, but he still stands out, and he's a really cool kind of figure that's just ready for action. I mean, you have the double-bladed scabbard here for his combat knives. One is out in his hand, the other is actually scabbarded. You have, I presume, is a tack aid here in his front. You have, of course, a reliquary thing here. You have the weapon itself. So, I mean, like, there's lots of cool little detail, and it's a very kind of dynamic, very action pose. So you can kind of do whatever you want with the Lieutenant. For something that's a Lieutenant, which is not exactly one of the massive Space Marine heroes, this is a beautifully designed sculpt for the Phobos Marines, and just class. I had real fun working on this guy. Again, it's he has the one shoulder pauldron here, but on the other side he doesn't have the full shoulder pauldron, but he does have a kind of a golden banner at the start that you could customize quite easily if you wanted to write down Ultra or whatever. If you are doing a custom chapter, that you can kind of even put a motto or something like that there. But basically a fantastic sculpt, a really, really nice little mini. We have another one here, which this guy I think seems to be the section medic, because he has basically what seems to be like something akin to the apothecary thing that you take out the gene seed if someone dies or gets hurt. He also has the medipack here at the back, and he's not quite in the mad action pose, but he is in a kind of a getting ready pose. I love the fact that he's here, he's working on the weapon. So this is a very lifelike, very kind of human, very kind of moment in time type of pose. So these Phobos Space Marines actually really come out very well. We have here another one of them. Again, same type of thing. He's obviously a veteran. His face is badly scarred. He has an open kind of comms unit here, very similar to something like in the Predator, and a pistol to hand with the actual bolt action slung, with the bolt rifle slung. So he's obviously a scout, or number one scout in this section, that he's got the boys behind following him. Just again, a very interesting, very dynamic kind of pose that he's leading the way. I mean, it doesn't overly work for big, massive kind of action scenes in the tabletop, but if you wanted to kind of create a diorama with these guys walking or on patrol, he's definitely the guy you would have up front. Another beautifully crafted mini. You have another one here, which is, again, someone who's on the Voxcom getting instructions. So it could be a number one scout of the following section, just hearing what's going on up ahead, or, the 2IC or something calling up to get the instructions from the LT or anything like that. But I mean, another kind of natural, normal pose that's not action, but more kind of, you know, more day-to-day kind of soldering or practical soldering, things like that. Like, so again, a very interesting, very beautiful mini. He also has this gold little thing which I kind of missed, a nice little icon, as well as his ammo pouches and grenade and the usual other assortments. You have another one here which I think is really cool as well. He's just casually dropping down a grenade down a hole. So it could be something like that there's a murder hole down there and he's just tossing in the grenade. It's a very kind of beautifully sculpted, very skilled, very dynamic kind of pose. Again, these Phobos Marines have been brilliantly designed. I mean, Games Workshop has really upped its game of late, but I mean, just the way that the smoke is already kind of popping out of it like that, it's excellent. And he's casually tossing the grenade. It's not this big kind of American NFL quarterback hoisting and throwing a grenade miles and miles and miles. It's a fella that he's not pushed, but he can't be bothered going in there, so he's just going to toss in the grenade and let that do the job for him. You have, of course, the Eliminator Sergeant, which I opted to not do the effect with the cloak this time and just do a kind of a simple Mechanicus Standard Grey and Dawnstone. So it looks much less of a mess than the last guy. So it's not great either. I mean, I'm not delighted with it, but I said for the sake of the video I'd give people the options. I'm going to do to this guy and the other fellow what I'm going to show you in the when the third eliminator appears in the issues. But nevertheless, it's quite interesting that he's got set binoculars, he's setting up the kill zone, he's just, you know, he's scouting. It's another cool kind of lifelike pose that's not just heat of combat, that it's more, if you wanted to make a diorama type of thing, that these are cool little action poses. And of course, this is the other oppressor of the sergeants. Now, this one is interesting because it had these three things out the front which differed it from the last suppressor. Again, be careful when you're gluing here, and be careful again with the actual weapon up the front, because it's just, you know, it's comically, now it's a testament to the sculpt and the engineering that it works when it's all glued together, but it's gluing it together is the problem. So just make sure that if you're gluing it, that everything is securely put in place. Now, I kind of used a combination of paint pots stacked and other things stacked on top of each other so that the weapon wouldn't drift from the model hands and from the model torso when I was gluing it. But nevertheless, a cool little thing. And one of the ways you can get the suppressor in the Warhammer Imperium magazines is to just get 3 of them instead of buying the whole big huge box set that they come with. So that was issue 65 of Warhammer Imperium. So issue 66 comes with the last of the Phobos Space Marines, the last of the Eliminators, and the last of the Suppressors. Again, a very interesting issue because it focuses basically on the extras that you're getting in these sprues. So you have here, of course, the Suppressor Squad. So you have the tree figures here. And like I said, these magazines are kind of the only way you can kind of get them all for roughly about 30 quid. And you get a lot of other Phobos Space Marines with them as well. So these issues, I think, are among the best value ones of the entire Warhammer Imperium magazine. You, of course, have the usual battle record, so if you want to kind of list them, name them. You also have the Eliminator Squad here, so you have the 3 different types of Eliminators come through. I opted actually to change the build because I actually love the hooded aspect rather than the bare head, and you'll see when I show you the mini why I opted to go for the hood again a third time. Of course, again, you can name them. It also has some information on the Second Tyrannic War, so basically round 2 from the Tyranids. You have here some information on the Chaos Knights. Now, the Knights are basically big, huge titans, walking machines that basically, they're just huge, kind of big mechanized suits of armor and death that are about 100 foot tall, and they just kill everything around them. So it's not just the Imperium that has them, it also Chaos has them, because some of these knights, they're called knights because they have no real loyalty to one thing or person, but they operate in a kind of a sense of chivalry, so hence the whole knight thing. But you have good knights and you obviously have bad knights, the Chaos Knights. It also goes into some more of the heroes. So the heroes that it focuses on this issue will be all from the Imperial Fists. So you have Darnath Lysander and you have Tor Gadon. You also have a story on the City of Death, and this one is interesting because it has the Gene Stealer cult. So the Gene Stealer cult are nasty. Basically, Tyranids, before they even invade a planet, will sometimes seed it. So they kind of basically infect the populace. And the populace, through 2 or 3 successive generations of people, will turn into kind of a human Tyranid gene stealer hybrid, and when the Tyranids arrive, these kind of half human, half Tyranids things actually fight on part of the Tyranids, only to be kind of course, eaten in the end. So it's kind of, in one sense, it's kind of tragic, but they're basically food that is trying to feed itself to the Tyranids because it thinks that the Tyranid High Fleet is a god. So basically, these guys are the ultimate turkeys voting for Christmas. You have, of course, how to build the Vanguard Space Marines, and you have the Angels of Death Space Marines Rules Part 2, and you have, of course, a mission called The Battle Below. So we'll have a look at the last of the minis here. So the first one I want to start with is the Eliminator. So this was my third attempt at the cloak, and to be honest with you, it's my favorite attempt because, I mean, I know it looks like he's covered in absolute muck, but that's looks like it's effective camouflage. So if he was lying flat on the ground, you wouldn't see him. So I went for the kind of 50% look with the last Eliminator Sergeant, but with this guy, I just much prefer it with kind of, he's completely covered in muck. So I'm just going to find the other guy. I was trying to go for an effect where he was decloaking, but it just, like I said, it just didn't work, and I wasn't overly impressed with the top part I did here. So I just opted for one that was complete muck, and I like it because I think he stands out a bit more from his other brother Space Marines, but it's kind of, it's a touch of, you know, Rambo coming out of the muddy wall to kind of get the Soviet soldier type of job. I just like it because, you know, it's muck is part and parcel of the whole thing, and it's cool to see these guys covered in muck and what is basically tip-top camouflage. Like, I mean, it's the stuff I used is called Sterling Mud, so it's kind of a texture paint that you put down, and it kind of works on bases, but I just put it all over this guy's cloak, and I put it on top of his hooded head as well. So I just thought, for my purposes, I mean, it's everyone's aesthetics are different, but I just thought this made him look a little bit more realistic, and I found it a lot easier than kind of trying to make the cloak work well or look well by kind of putting in stealth mechanics or following this kind of opaque stealthy pattern that the Eliminators have. This, of course, these are kind of a repeat of the other sprues. So we've seen these minis again. So this is, of course, the fellow with the two-handled pistol grip. This is the fella kind of, again, being spurred into action. So we've seen these in the previous issue. So you could, if, like, you don't have to get all 3 separate issues because, yeah, it's the same sprue as the issue, I think, 3 or 4 issues ago. And you have, of course, the final part of the suppressors. But there is variance so that you can kind of have the head going a different way, or small variants to distinguish him from the other suppressor. But nevertheless, an interesting issue, but my favorite part of it was just kind of settling in on a paint scheme for my Eliminators. And now that I've shown it and kind of brought it to the camera, I am very tempted to get my other prior to Eliminators and just muck them up like this to make them look a little less naff, to be honest with you. So that was issue 67 of Warhammer Imperium magazine. Now, issue 67 is a paint issue, but of course, paint issues means that you get a little bit more lore. So the lore in this one focuses on the Silver Templars, which are kind of a new Space Marine founding. It focuses on gravitic battle tanks, so it goes into some little detail of the heavy armor that the Space Marines have. It also goes into details on the Blood Ravens. Now, what's interesting is in modern 40k lore, the Imperium has been split in 2. There's something called the Caledix Maledictum, which has literally turned the Imperium into a north and a south. Robuta Gilliman is kind of in charge of the south, but the person in charge of the north is a man called Commander Dante, who is just, basically, he's the hero of heroes for the Blood Angels. He also wears the death mask of Sanguinius. So he's a commander that is highly respected and is pretty much the reason that the northern part of the Imperium is held together. You also have Mephiston, Lord of Death. Now, Mephiston is a very interesting character in Blood Angels lore because basically their Primarch, the leader, their Gene Father, died. And because he died, it's had a kind of a psychic effect on all of them. So eventually, it's kind of the curse of the Blood Angels that they will succumb to their rage and they'll go into a berserker fury and never come back. Generally, they die in an act of absolute mass heroism, but they never come back, except, of course, for Mephiston, Lord of Death, who's the only Blood Angel to have succumbed to the Black Rage and actually gotten his wits and come back. So he again is also a very scary kind of hero. You have the How to Paint guide for the Necrons, but this is an interesting one because it touches on the last aspects and how to kind of finish them up properly. So you have a final gallery here of all the Necrons that you have painted and gotten. You have also some extra little aspects where you can use Tesseract Glow and White Scar on the Ultramarines, so such as the bikes, the helmets, and also here on the Mechanicus and some of the tubes and whatnot. So just to kind of make the miniatures pop a little bit more and give them a nice, cool little effect. Same thing again on the Sisters, that it just allows you to kind of add that little extra detail to it. Now you have whole Adeptus Mechanicus rules, such as the Holy Orders, and you have a mission called the Auspex Array. Now issue 68 comes with the last of the Canoptic Wraiths, so this is the third version of it. It also goes into a theatre war called the Grand Bastion of the Caesarican. Now forgive my pronunciation, but this is a big battle between the Imperium and the Necrons. You have the Third Tyrannic War. You have characters, heroes again for the Necrons. You have Trazyn the Infinite, and you have Imoketh the Stormlord, and you have a story again with the Necrons and I believe the Eldar. So you also have here a how to build guide for the third Canoptic Wraith, which is fairly similar to the last one, and of course how to paint guide. So you already have these sheets before, but what is new, however, is the final details that you kind of apply to them using the paints from the last two issues. So you have a final gallery here, and of course the last part of it is more Necron rules, and the actual mission itself is called the Front Lines. So the actual model itself, of course, is the third Canoptic Wraith, and again, he was very similar to the last two I did. Now this one I opted to go back for the actual blades, because the one that stood out the most, I gave him the kind of the tentacle things. Now it's up to yourself. You can have the short little blades, or you can have the kind of the tentacle whip aspects. But again, a cool, sinister little model, quite big. I mean, if you hold it up to other minis, he just dwarfs them. So it's a very cool, very imposing model, and of course it has a small base, so for what it is, it stands out really well. I love the way that the tail curls around. It balances very well. It glues together very well. So again, this is exceptional engineering and exceptional sculpting again from the Games Workshop. What I will say though is the legs and the side bits here, assemble it slowly. The guide says to do it and assemble it one at a time, and it is very correct in saying so, because it's very easy to get these mixed up. And some people, I don't know why, they'll snip a lot of pieces out of the sprue. Just be careful what you're snipping out of the sprue, and do it slowly and carefully. But the Canoptic Wraith, again, is a fantastic model, and one that just stands out really well on the battlefield. So that was issue 68. Now, issue 69 is part 1 of 2 of Marneus Calgar and his Honor Guard. Now, you don't get the entire thing in this issue, but I did assemble them and paint them because I have issue 70. But you're not going to get a complete mini in this issue. So if you want to have Marneus Calgar and his Honor Guard, you'll have to buy both issues. So it's, of course, focuses on the man himself, Marneus Calgar. Now, Marneus Calgar is the chapter master of the Ultramarines and was basically leader of the 500 worlds of Ultramar before Guilliman came back. When Guilliman came back, of course, he could have simply taken over, and Marneus Calgar was more than happy for him to do so, but Guilliman instead had to be the leader of the Imperium. So the responsibility and leadership of the Ultramarines again fell back to Marneus Calgar. Now, his story is quite a cool one. I won't spoil it, but there is also a great comic book series that you can get on the Marvel app, I believe, that just tells the story of Marneus Calgar, and it's a nice one. I enjoyed the read. Just his origins, how he kind of tried to join the Ultramarines, just basically his origin story. And there's a nice little twist in it. So it's if you're looking for if you're between comic books and you want something interesting to read and you're getting into Warhammer 40k, have a look for the Marneus Calgar comic book series on the Marvel app, and it's quite good. You have, of course, different aspects of him. So he's a fearless strategist, and he has his honor guard. You have here the ancient origins. So this is back in the 30th millennium, when the Emperor still walked amongst the legions and there was a massive crusade. And this part I actually really like, because this is the first founding. So these are all the Space Marine chapters that were there at the before the Horus Heresy. And you can see them here before many of them turned to Chaos. And what's also cool is that the 2nd Legion and the 11th Legion are unknown. Now, initially they were kind of left unknown because it allowed people to have a bit more creativity with their painting. But it's actually been kind of brought into the lore and the story, and it's made very, very interesting, very sinister. No one actually knows anything about it. I mean, they've hinted at it, but no one knows the name of the Primarchs, no one knows the names of the legions, because they were just literally eradicated from history. So it's a cool little part of the story, and maybe they'll touch on it a little bit more, but it is fun to have the mystery. But you, of course, see here all of the different legions, going all the way up from the Dark Angels to the Alpha Legion, and the old school Ultramarines here. So you have the old kind of Mark III armor that they have here, and the Word Bearers. So that was just a kind of a cool little page. I quite liked that. You have the tracked battle tanks. You have, of course, just basically the different variations of it, the transports, and this as well is cool because this is the Rogue Trader. Rogue Traders basically operate on the fringe of the Imperium, are basically, I'd say, modern day space pirates, but they're also kind of the first point of contact between aspects of the Imperium and other races. So these be the guys that would kind of pioneer and find out the fringes of the space, meet species at the first time, see what technology can do, but they're basically rogues and traders and pirates and Rogue Trader essentially. But the very first iteration of this game was called Rogue Trader. I believe it was a kind of an RP game, but it just kind of grew from that into these big massive kind of tabletop war games. So you have here different aspects of the Rogue Traders and different Rogue Traders here. So I mean, you have 4 here. There's also Janus Drac. So this guy is pretty cool because he's part of the Blackstone Fortress board game. So if the idea of the Rogue Traders appeals to you, there is the Blackstone Fortress Warhammer Quest game, which focuses on this character. He's one of the playable characters in it, and it's a really cool little mini that it's a kind of a game that you play through a story, and you kind of grow and level up your character and kind of find out what the secret of the actual Blackstone Fortress is as well. You also have the how to build guide for Marneus Calgar and his 2 honor guards. So the build guide is here, and you have, of course, the warlord traits and a tutorial again about auras, but also the Heart of the Tomb, which is the final story, which is not the final story, sorry, which is the final part of this issue with its mission. You also, of course, have an Imperium magazine pullout, which is pretty cool, which is called Rise of the Primarch, which again is one of these fold-out sheets, which talks basically about Robute Guilliman's basically coming back from the dead at the Imperium's darkest hour. So I didn't build the entire honor guard. What I did is I built Marneus Calgar. Now you can't build him from issue 60 because the head is in issue 70, and certain other little essential pieces, I think, like part of the gauntlet or part of the shoulder pauldron is in issue 60. So you can't pick him up with just issue 69. You'll need to pick up issue 69 and 70 in order to get Marneus Calgar. But yeah, he was a fun mini to paint. I wasn't sure if he was an old sculpt or a new sculpt, but he's actually new because of the Gravis boot here. He comes with a kind of a Gene Stealer head that I just, I put some blood for the blood god on top of it and splashed it on top. He's a really cool looking mini. There's a lot, if you're a very good painter, there's a lot you can do here with it now. Unfortunately, I'm only an average painter and I'm not great with aspects of gold, but I did have fun building him. Maybe down the line when I do improve my skills, I'll touch up on him a little bit more, but he's very ostentatious. Now his weapons are the fists or the gauntlets of Ultramar, which are basically 2 power fists with a big bolter underneath, and it has, of course, rounds being pumped out here, so he's obviously firing from the hip essentially at this point. He has 2 bolters, and as you can see, they're fed into the back here. He has a huge power pack, which is adorned again by the twin Aquillas. You have the Ultramarine symbol on top. and you have a kind of a lovely Roman Legion type of thing going here in the front. Now the cloak again is white, and I hate working with white. So I tried a lot of different things to kind of make the white cloak, but again, as you can see, it's still not the best because white is just such a horrible paint or thing to work with. But nevertheless, because that's Marneus Calgar's colours, I opted to kind of try and stay true to the actual character as much as I could. The Honor Guard, however, I opted to go for a black and red colour as opposed to white and red, and I find that it suits my purposes as well quite nicely. But nevertheless, this is Marneus Calgar. He is a cool little mini. He's obviously the leader of the Ultramarines and a very powerful figure in his own right. Very ostentatious, very chunky, and as you can see, like he's much bigger than the typical Space Marine. And it is the part of him is, or the majority of him is what you get in issue 69, but you will need issue 70 to utterly complete him. This is issue 70 of Warhammer Imperium magazine, and of course it's part 2 of the Marneus Calgar sprue with Marneus Calgar himself and the 2 Honor Guard. Now again, it's an interesting magazine because it goes into Marneus Calgar himself, basically what his stats are, what the gauntlets of Ultramar, which are his fists, the armour of Herallicus, and the optical replacement for his eye. You have the Vitrix Honor Guard, and it goes into some of their details. You have Kaldor Drago, which is one of the most famous of the Grey Knights, because basically he's been lost in the warp. He's the chapter master of the Grey Knights, or the Grand Master, I should say, of the Grey Knights. But he's been lost in the warp for so long that they've had to kind of not move on without him. They are aware that he's there and that he's still doing all the good, but basically he fights demons on their home turf, and basically he terrifies the living you-know-what out of them from fighting them, because he's just the scariest Grey Knight of them all. You also have Carrion Crow, which is the bearer of the Black Blade of Antwyr, which is a very interesting character because the blade is constantly trying to corrupt him, but only he can resist it. You have the How to Paint Calgar and Victrix Guard. You have, of course, it goes into proper details, and like because he's a kind of a centerpiece for your army, he's someone you do want to kind of do a little bit of extra care. So you also have the data sheets for Calgar and the Victrix Honor Guard, and of course the mission is called Precision Strike. Now the actual minis themselves, which is the second part of it, are the Honor Guard lads. So these guys you do get complete, and I have to say they were quite cool to paint. I don't like working with white, so instead of having a background or the underground or the back part of the cloak is red, but on the other side it's supposed to be white, but I just opted for black, and to be honest with you, it just suited my purposes because my patience with white is always very finite. But they are beautiful little minis, very Roman Legion type of thing, so as you can see there's a great kind of Roman Legionary aspect. I painted this white and I just put in a bit of Gilliman blue and let it flow into the actual grooves of it, so it's you have the Ultramarine symbol there that's kind of not perfect but easier made than you would think. As you can see here, this is the under part of the cloak, which is black, and the over part, which is of course red. But yeah, no, they're absolutely gorgeous minis, and these are the guys that would flank Marneus Calgar. So if Marneus Calgar goes into battle, he's followed by these guys, and one of course covers the left and one of course covers the right. And they are a cool kind of centerpiece for your army if you wanted to, you know, display them, or even if you just wanted to put them on the battlefield. The shield, of course, really stands out, so it's a very cool Roman Legion type of vibe for the chapter master of the Ultramarines. Now, this is everything you get from issues 61 to 70. You get quite a lot, actually. You get a full Phobos strike force. You get 3 eliminators, 3 suppressors, which again is the cheapest. This is the cheapest way to get these 3 lads. You have Marneus Calgar, 2 of his Honor Guard. You have the Necron Snipers. You have the last one of the Tomb Blades, and you have the last one of the Canoptic Wraiths. Now, it's actually very hard to choose a favourite mini amongst them because, well, I have 3 main contenders. Marneus Calgar was cool to paint, but to be honest with you, I actually prefer his Honor Guard. I don't know why, they're a bit more Roman Legion to me, so I thought that these guys were really cool to paint, a lot easier and a lot more fun, especially since I opted to kind of go for a black undercloak with the guys instead of a white undercloak like I did with Marnius Calgar. So I felt more confident. The only thing I didn't like was having to put white on the pauldrons and of course on the shield itself. But from a tabletop standard, it's a good enough paint job that I'm happy with. The Phobos Marines I thought were excellent. I mean, these are just magnificently sculpted. For guys who are ordinary grunts per se, they look class. I mean, this is Games Workshop sculpting and engineering at its absolute best. I thought these guys just look fantastic. The Phobos Marines, despite just being normal grunts, were great fun to paint, great variety, and very interesting, which was fortunate because there was a lot of them. The other one that I kind of would stack among my favorites would be this guy. Not in the sense that, like, they're cool models, but the one I hate the most, would you believe it, is this guy, because I messed up his cloak so badly. But the one I like the best is this one, because I took what would be a choice out of my comfort zone and just decided to muck up his entire cloak and go for a kind of, actual proper camouflage concealment effect where he blends into the actual ground by just having actual muck and covered in dirt and goop and whatnot. But it was a decision I made out of my comfort zone, and of all the minis that I've done here, I think this one is the one I am happiest with personally, because it was the easiest way to do the cloaks, and it was what I think it stands out. I mean, if you put this Eliminator with any of the others, he stands out, of course, because he's covered in a big dirty grey cloak, but to me it looks more realistic, because that is, part and part of warfare is camouflage and concealment, and the whole point of the Eliminators is eliminating targets from a concealed position. The Canoptic Wraith and the Tomb Blade were, well, to be honest with you, they're just the end versions of it, so I won't pick them because, they were already the highlight of the previous issues. But I think my favourite mini would be the Honor Guard themselves, at a push, followed very closely by, and just for my own personal bias, because I went out of my comfort zone, the Eliminator with the big muck cloak, which, to be honest with you, I'm probably going to do the same to the other two lads, just to make them stand out that little bit more. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was issues 61 to 70 of the Warhammer Imperium magazine. You do get a nice bit here, and well worth collecting. And join us in maybe 2.5 months for issues 71 to 80 of Warhammer Imperium. Now, originally, the series was supposed to end at issue 80, but there's plenty of rumours and whispers in the warp that it's going to go on an extra 10 issues, and possibly even an extra 10 issues after that. So despite planning for 80 issues painted for Warhammer Imperium, there's a real risk I might be doing 100 issues of Warhammer Imperium magazine painted. So until then, good luck, God bless, thank you so much for following the series so far, and as always, if you do enjoy these videos, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff, and until next time, good luck, God bless, and stay safe.